for an industry. For example, we added PPK years ago for the automotive industry, and other statistics are or were specific to a customer that had a need for it. To give us flexibility in adding new statistics, whether universally shared or specific to one customer, we decided to give the end users a way to add them without having to wait for the next release cycle to get the statistic into the GainSeeker system. Now, even with this capability, we still occasionally add new statistics to the standard list of stats as they are developed by a standards body or as they become more commonly used. Besides a new calculation, other common uses of this functionality include changing the display format of an item or calculating a new statistic based on other statistics. The benefit of using existing statistics is that you don't need to validate your new stat, knowing that the value is derived from an existing validated stat. Other statistics we have seen are built from scratch or even pull information from other systems in order to calculate a value, such as a foods producer that might calculate the giveaway either in terms of pounds or cost for a given data set. So in that case, they might pull the costing info from an ERP system, and then that way they can have both the pounds and the cost for that giveaway. And with that background, I'll turn it over to Jenny Lee.
Well, thank you very much, Byron. I appreciate that, and I'm really happy to be able to do this little talk today. Custom statistics are something that I use all the time, work with a lot of customers on them, so I know that it's a robust tool, and I know that it's a tool that a lot of people get a lot of good use out of. I thought what I would do is start a little bit and talk about the process of what happens when you decide to build a custom stat before I go into the details. And just real quickly, custom stats can be extremely complex. They can be very, very simple. But if you're going to build one for yourself, the first thing I suggest you do is really sit down and map it out. So something has made you decide that you need a stat. Either you've been told you have to develop something new by one of your customers, or you find that you're recalculating something the same way over and over and over again. That's a good time to think about maybe doing a custom stat. When you do start to develop one, I always sit down myself. I decide what is it that I'm trying to accomplish, what's my end goal, and then I'll write down the logic and maybe some of the math behind it and any of the statistics that I think I might be using in GainSeeker, just to get a good picture of that before I actually start building. And then I go in and I start building. So I thought I'd walk through an example where we develop a custom stat. Our stat is going to be the mean minus target X. We found we keep calculating that, and we just want to go ahead and make a statistic for it. So when you do start building a custom stat, you start at Launchpad and go into the System Administration module. It will open up, defaults to opening up to the User tab. You want to go over to the Configurations tab. And because custom stats are used across all of your configurations, it's in your system-wide settings down there at the bottom. So you could go and expand that node. You could go into your search window here and type custom, and you'll see that I'm going to be doing an SPC stat. If I click on that, it takes me right over in the window to where I need to be. So now we go ahead and open up that window by double clicking, and you can see that this is a list of all the custom stats I already have in my system, but I want to make a new one. And so that's what I'm going to do. I click on the new button. That opens up this custom stat editor window for us, and so I'll walk through that with you just a bit. The very first thing you have is it defaults to opening to your label, which is going to be the name of your statistic, and we're going to call this deviation from target X. And you'll notice that on the screen here, I also can see what type of value I'm going to be creating. I'm going to be creating a string with this particular statistic. And we do have the ability, once we write it, to test it. We'll walk through that as well. Over here to the right, this is a list of all of our existing statistics. So as Byron had mentioned, we're going to build our statistic from existing statistics. That way we know that our calculations are going to be solid and we won't have to worry about that. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. You'll notice that it starts in the window by defaulting to new stat equals something. When we finish writing our statistic, the last line is going to say new stat equals whatever it is we've developed. So that's going to be the last thing in our line. I usually go up and just give myself a couple of lines in front of that new stat to do my build. So we want to do the mean minus target X. That's what we want our new stat to be. So the first thing we have to do is grab those stats and make variables, set variables to those stats. So I'm going to say that my mean equals, we have a statistic for that. If I go over here to my list and type in mean, you'll see that that statistic and all the statistics with the word mean pop up. I can double click on mean and it pops it right over in there. So let's talk about what actually just happened. That stat spc.getStat command is actually a Python command, a group of commands that our developers have put together. And so we know that if we use that command, we're getting the right statistic for mean. And I'm going to do the same thing for target X. Go over here and look for target.
She's making this look really easy.
Mm-hmm. I try. And double click on target X, and there we go. So now we have the first two pieces of our statistic. And we could just go in now and make our new statistic and say that it's going to be mean minus target X. But one of the things I want to think about at this point is, what if, for some reason, I don't have a mean? I don't know why that would happen necessarily, but what if I only have one data point and I have no mean? What if the target X, so the nominal spec standard, that limit wasn't set on our standard? What if we overlooked it? What would happen to the statistic calculation? So we want to accommodate that possibility in our statistics. So I'm going to do a little if loop, look at those two possibilities, and then code around it. And this is all Python scripting, in case I hadn't actually said that. So we're going to start with an if statement, and what I want to do is say, if my mean is none, so I don't have one, what happens? Well, then my new statistic is going to equal none as well. That's great. So that talks about what happens with the mean. What about target X? So if mean is fine, but we don't have a target X, so target X equals none, is none, then my new stat would still also equal none. So we've coded around the possibility of that happening. Now you notice this, if you're familiar with Python, which you may be since you're listening to this, white space is important in Python, tabbing is important in Python, so you just have to watch the syntax and how you use it, and make sure that you don't leave something out that you shouldn't. And then now we know, let's say if we do have a mean and we do have a target X, what do we do? Well, now at this point we want to calculate our statistic. So if none of those two things happen, we want to make our statistic, and that would be new stat equals my mean minus my target X. That's great. For this particular example, I'm also going to round the decimal places. I happen to know that the demo dashboard I'm going to show you here in a second will look really funny if I don't. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And so I'm just rounding, and that is a function in Python. And because I've set that new stat, that's what I'm going to be rounding. And we just say how many decimal points, how many digits after the decimal point are resetting it. I'm going to do, let me do 4. 6 is probably too many. And there you go. Now, at this point, just to show you something, a mistake I've made more often than I want to admit, if I accidentally leave new stat equals 1 plus 1 at the end, I'm only going to ever get 2. So you don't want to do that. Make sure you take that out of there. And that is our statistic. That's the code for it. So let's see if it works. If we hit test here, we should get a value there. That's great. It works. Awesome. If it didn't work, so let's demonstrate that by messing up this little line of code here, we would get a little X. Then we could go into our debugger and say, hey, what's wrong with our statistic here? And we can actually walk through line by line and look. So if we click pause over here and do start, we can walk through and look right there. It's telling us, hey, we have a problem. This should not say equal sign. And I'm going to go correct that. So I'm going to close that window and correct it. And it's right here. So the reason for that, in case you're just new to Python, If you want to compare, so if you say something like if mean is something, you're not saying if mean equals something. I'm asking about the state of its existence. Does it exist this way? If it does, then I'm going to set it equal to something else. Those are two different things. This returns a true or a false. Is it that? Yes or no? This is a mathematical statement. I'm going to set it to something.
So 1 equals an assignment and 2 is a comparison.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Better said. So that is our statistic. I haven't saved this yet, so I want to go ahead and make sure I do that.
So
Yes?
real quick question for either one of our panelists here. What data set is used when clicking on that test button?
So that's an internal data set with just some fake data in there.
So it's more testing the validity
yeah.
and the syntax of the code, not
Right. It's just some.
going to actual real data.
Right. It's all the same data set is used if you're creating a dashboard, as an example, maybe a dial gauge on a dashboard. That same data set's used there.
Okay.
We mainly created it for use with dashboards, so you have some test data. Like in a dashboard, you can turn that design data property to false, and then it will use real data.
Right.
But if you leave that design data to true, it's using that design data in this case as well. Same data set.
Awesome. Thanks. Great question. I'm glad it was just perfect spot for it. So.
Yeah, it was.
All right.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save that. And so now I have this new stat, and I'll just expand this one over here so you can see dev from target X. So that's in my stat list now. If I go someplace else and say, show me the full stat list, it's going to do that. One thing I didn't mention, but I will here, you can see that we have index numbers for each of these statistics. In our full list, we also had index numbers. That's what we ended up referencing. So now that I have that, let's go ahead and look at a dashboard that I have set up just as an example. And here it is. I've got this dashboard set up. It may yell at me because no, it did all right. So I couldn't remember if I named my stats the same thing. So this is our dashboard, very, very simple. This is the data grid. It has the part number a couple of times because I forgot to hide it. The mean, the target X, and then our deviation from target. So that's our new stat. You'll notice up at the top, we had one where the target X was set to none, and our result was, hey, it's not applicable. We don't have any.
So by doing that error trapping, we got an NA and allowed it to still go and calculate for all the other ones.
So had we not done that, we would have gotten an error message. We still would have calculated everything else in the dashboard. But where it says dev from target, we would have seen error, and then it told us what the error was.
Right.
Nice.
Okay. So that's a simple statistic. I don't know, are there any other questions at this point or anything, Byron and Jen, that you can think of about that process?
I think we're good. Just as a reminder, if anybody has questions, please go ahead and let us know.
All right.
Instead, I think, you've got like a example of like a really huge.
I do. So the one we just did was like a dozen lines of code, including blank lines, right? So here's an example of a more complex one. This is one that we've used with another customer, sort of in a generic format. But as you can see, there's a lot going on in this code. Let's just flip down here.
The scroll bar scares me.
98 lines for our new stat. Again, it includes white space. But this code has a lot of things in it. So you can see one of the first is we're defining a function. We're also referencing specific tables. And later on, we're setting up whether or not our values are floats or integers. How are we doing our math? And we have some kind of complex math in there. We also reference some SQL statements in here. So here's a SQL query. This particular one actually goes to the JDE program for this particular client, grabs some values from there, throws them into the stat. So this statistic does a lot.
So you're saying even if GainSeeker doesn't house that information to be able to create statistics, we're still able to go out to other places and marry the two together to get the...
Absolutely. As long as we have that connection and know what that connection is, we can put it in here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So that's a good example, though, of something that, you know, took a long time to think out. It was very specific. The client was asked to provide something specific, and so it took a lot of programming and a lot of thought and logic to actually get that statistic to be valid.
Great.
So those are my examples.
All right. Maybe go back to the simple
Sure.
statistic and just
Mhm.
step it through the debugger.
Absolutely. We can do that. So if we go through our debugger here
And just
and walk through.
step through.
So if we start here, you'll notice that your local variables show up over here as we walk through each of the lines. So we've got a mean out there. Again, there's that test data that we have. Our target X, again, that test data is out there. And now what happens if it equals none? Well, it doesn't. So it's going to walk through to the next thing. Else, if target X equals none, and it doesn't, so it's going to go to the next part of the loop. And then now we're setting our statistics. So at this point, new stat doesn't equal anything. We do the calculation, and there's the stat. And that was the number that was up in the test window when we tested it, and it tested successfully. When we round it, we go here, and now you can see that because I had 4 digits, it didn't change, but it would have changed had you done that. So that's how all of that steps through.
And that debugger is very similar to the one that's in the Python and the inspection
Right.
editor.
Very similar.
Yeah, it's
Like
similar
the-
to the original one we used in like inspection editor. So
Mhm.
at some point we need to update that one as well to use some of the more new functionality. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
But very, very robust. You could use any Python code that you can write that gives you a meaningful result can be put in here as a custom stat. So don't limit yourself. And again, from my experience, it's mostly been applied where we continue to calculate the same thing over and over every time we do a report or whatnot, or we find that we need to build something robust like that complex one to get something very, very specific.
yeah. So it's a great tool for reuse. Yeah, where
Mhm.
you're calculating values that you want applied in reports and that sort of thing, and even to put on a dashboard so you can see it there too, not just for printer reports.
Exactly.
And if people need help, there's some links on
Absolutely.
on that screen for some Python.
So there are Python references up here. This is actually, I think this is python.org. Yeah. So I go here a lot for resources. Very, very easy to find. It's easy to search. It's laid out in a nice logical way. And it's a real good resource. Stack Overflow is another good resource for Python questions. If you
That's a great one, yeah.
Yeah, if you have a particular code, you can say, hey, here's my code, it's not working, and then there will be people in that forum who will look it up and maybe help you out. We also have that tutorial. Again, this is python.org, but very specific. Here's what we're trying to do. Here's an example, and you can even walk through the examples yourself, cut and paste the code sometimes, run it, and see exactly what's happening behind the scenes. And then, of course, we have our Hertzler library, which this opens up our help file page for that. But in the Python script editor, why don't I open that up? I'll open the one for inspection so you can see that option.
And we do have, right, since you said we're opening the one in the inspection, we have 2 different Python libraries.
Well, we have 2
There
different
are about
places.
5 or 6.
Yeah.
Okay, walk me through them. I've been in sales too long.
Yeah, so there's a library for both SPC and DMS statistics. So there's 2 different libraries.
Okay.
There's one for dashboards, one for inspections. Help me out. There's 1 or 2 others too.
Those are the ones I can think of at the moment. Dashboards, inspections.
I was saying dashboard inspections.
Inspections.
I wasn't separating, I was
And the-
being
and the
general.
two
And
stats.
I'll go
Okay.
back to the stat window to show that too.
Yeah.
But for inspections, this is the script library. So these are scripts that you can look at and say, oh gosh, yeah, I think that would be really handy for me to have. Super easy to import. Let's say that I want to do this one. I have no idea if I already have it. You highlight the one you want, and you just say, I want to add it to my list. So I'm just going to say.
You have a lot of scripts in there, by the
I
way.
do. I hold whole bunches. All right, and now it's been imported, and it actually takes me to a window where I can look at that script and edit it, but this is how it comes right out of our library. So, and as you can see from this one, we have good documentation. We'll say, use this part just as it is, use this part and adjust it this way for your system. So our developers have done a good job of putting that together. If we go back to our, what I want, if I go back to my custom stat window, there it is, and I cancel out of this, here's our statistics library. And because I was doing an SPC stat before, those are the stats that I'm seeing here. These are SPC stats. So there you go.
So we also have retrieval scripts if you're doing external data
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
SPC.
Thank
and
you
D.
to our one of our developers in the back that's online.
He's like,
saved the day.
don't forget the most important thing, right?
These are what you're forgetting.
Thanks,
Okay.
Jackson.
Yeah.
See, it's really a group effort here.
That's right, that's right. So yes, and when we do custom retrievals, yeah, definitely save those because you can do them as Python or not. Let's grab that, in fact. So where's a good spot to show that? Dynamic desktops, does that have Python scripting?
Probably
Okay,
just
right there. So, for instance, here we can do a Python script. We can create one, and that would, for this particular desktop, help us build the retrieval that
Right.
desktop's going to reflect.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
That's it.
All right.
Okay.
I don't see any other questions at this moment. I don't think anybody's going to get mad if we finish 5 minutes early.
That's
Okay.
okay.
But I definitely appreciate everybody being here. Jane Lee, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Um,
My pleasure. Send email to support@hertzler.com if you have questions. Anybody in customer service would be able to help you with a script question.
All right. Awesome.
all right. Well, thanks everybody, and we'll let you have a few minutes back to your day.
All right.
Look forward to seeing you again next month.
Thanks.